Waiting for the used to get in. We're good. We're live on Twitch. We're live on YouTube. And I believe we're about to go live over on the Sportscaster. There we are. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. We're on a live stream right now for the XFL Week 2. There's a good chance, as I imagine, 70, maybe not that high, but 50 to 70% of the people will watch this on a replay. Recording 10 a.m. East Coast time, a little less than 4 hours before lock. Gonna wait for some people to get in here. But I will point out at the beginning of this, as you go along and you watch it, it's gonna be very Q&A based. My interests are labeled, but they are not depicted in ranking or tier order. That is over on Patreon. If you were interested, we had about 100 people sign up for Patreon. Welcome to the community in the Discord. I posted a podcast this morning going position by position, game by game even in a way, going very in-depth. What's going on, Crimson Type? Welcome into the YouTube chat. Going very in-depth into what I am going to be doing today. Some lineup construction discussions. Really, at the end of the day, our rankings and tiers is out there on Patreon for XFL Priority and Hall of Fame members. The podcast is for anybody in all sports. All that is uploaded right now, as well as the sheets that will depict where my interests lie, and then the rankings and tiers over on Patreon. So that's the questions, if anybody has them, more in-depth information. The tiers went out yesterday, have been updated throughout all of yesterday, finishing touches early this morning. Podcast went out early this morning as well. Thanks for all you do, says Rob. What's going on, everybody? Kevin, what's up? Gilbert, how you doing? Everybody, welcome in. I'll give a couple minutes for people to hop in. Feel free to ask whatever questions that you have. I guess the only questions that I won't specifically answer are when people say, who are your top 3 running backs? Who are your top 3 wide receivers? Who's your top quarterback? Because on a sport where there's only 4 games and 8 teams, that stuff is going to be more Patreon focused. I'm fine talking about injuries and how those affect the slates. Overall theory about the XFL, players who I think are fine, and we'll go through position by position and you'll see. But when it comes to like ranking players out, I'll probably avoid those questions and just point people towards Patreon, because at this point, there's a few hundred people over there using that information, so it'll still stay secure for them. Jeremiah asks, what is the XFL? It is the Extreme Football League. It is relaunched, second week. They did a lot of great things in week 1. I am very curious to see what the interest is week 2. If we're going anywhere off of YouTube interest, week 1, I think I had most of my videos around 5,000 views. This week, they're going to come in probably around 3,000 or so about a 40% drop-off. If they lose about a 40% drop-off in viewership for the XFL, I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know if that's obviously not a good thing. I don't know what their projections are moving forward. Haven't really looked, but it's bound to drop off. You don't have a huge marketing lead up and people curious of what to expect, and people then not go, I don't really care too much about what I just watched, right? So it's bound to drop off. It's just a matter of how much, because however much it drops off will be how much these prize pools on DraftKings drop off, which means how much the interest goes down. So it'll be interesting to see. Is Thompkins good for my captain? I'm trusting you. Okay, so here's the biggest news. I have no interest in DeAndre Thompkins. He is listed now as a backup after his foot injury. He went from being listed as a starter to a backup. You do not just consciously make Rashad Ross the starter over DeAndre Thompkins if you don't plan on doing it that way. Like if you were to say, it's going to be split Thompkins and Rashad Ross, and you would just leave DeAndre Thompkins as the one on your depth chart. They made a conscious effort in DC to say, you know what, we're going to put Rashad Ross ahead of you. Rashad Ross needed to get more snaps last week, learn the offense. He had 21 routes run. I think he could even stay in that same area in routes run, and Thompkins can be worked in. But now that it looks like Thompkins is going to operate as the, at best, third wide receiver, likely rotating in with Rashad Ross and maybe Dupree to an extent, I don't really have much interest in DeAndre Thompkins anymore. And you'll see that as we go through. So I guess that's the biggest thing you can see right here. DeAndre Thompkins is probable with a foot, listed as a backup on the depth chart. I would not want to play him in my captain spot. I would even really be weary of rostering him at all at this point. What's going on, Jeremiah? What's going on, Marley? What's up, everybody? Yeah, WWE football, says Jeremiah. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, they're not correlated at all, the WWE. The only correlation between WWE and the XFL is Vince McMahon. The WWE is a publicly owned company, or is a publicly traded company. The XFL is private under a different umbrella completely. So it's literally just the owners are the same, and not much more after that. The owner being Vince McMahon, too. All right, so any interest in Cameron Artis-Payne? Hard to have too much interest. I don't really want to be rostering that many running backs in my lineups. He's in a backfield that has 4 running backs by committee. At least he ran a good amount of routes, but a lot of the upside out of all 4 of those running backs probably came from the fact that Philip Nelson targeted running backs 15 or 16 times last week, only threw downfield twice. It's really hard to like Cameron Artis-Payne this week, even if you're trying to get sneaky. His price point is still up there. Not much interest. I tried building a lineup in XFL after doing some research, and I'm sorry at this time I can't do XFL. It's like WNBA at best. well, first of all, the prize pools are way larger than WNBA, but similar to WNBA, and WNBA is getting a little bit more efficient because there's more content. I covered WNBA the last year. If you cover the XFL and you take action on the theories that you're presenting early on, yes, there's going to be some content out there. Mine is one of the only free resources, video and podcast-wise, related specifically to DFS. I know there's a lot of articles, great work I've seen there, some stuff behind paywalls. I'm sure it's great work, but if you're covering or you're trying to build XFL on your own, and the research you're going to do is a lot. Before the season started, I probably put in easily 100 hours of research into the week 1 slate, if not more, between depth charts, between the draft, following it all the way then in the summer, just tentatively. So yeah, if you're trying to build lineups like this morning with yourself and just doing some research and looking at game logs, you're going to probably have a really difficult time. If you are a patron of mine, if you're a subscriber to another website, if you're following a lot of content and you're following these games and have access to data resources, yeah, you'll probably have an idea of what's going on today and really be able to identify where underpriced guys are, where some fluky performances were last week, and really what these teams are all about and what they want to do. Which teams looked a little bit fluky last week? I can name 1 to 2. Which teams that looked great are probably still going to look great? I can name 1 to 2. So I think you can have a better idea. I don't think it's like the WNBA. In an overall context at all, the prize pools, the stakes are much, much higher. And there's also a lot more news and reporting. The WNBA's marketing, they should hire whoever the executives of marketing are at the XFL, because their marketing is absolutely horrendous. I've been trying to reach out for them for a year to help with marketing, because I actually think the sport of the WNBA is a fine sport, but their marketing is horrendous. The XFL's has been fantastic, and that's what just hurts the WNBA's overall upside. Prize pools will stay smaller. JDA says, love the picks. Keep them coming. Thank you. Who is going to start for LA? So, yes, this is Josh Johnson is tentatively expected to start for LA, but officially listed questionable. If he doesn't start, all hell breaks loose, because it's probably Jalen McClendon, and he looked terrible in like 4 pass attempts last week. Charles Kanoff is not going to play this week. He's already listed out. So I'm hoping Josh Johnson starts. The big issue with this slate is if Josh Johnson doesn't start, I'm expecting a lot of people to want to own Nelson Spruce. That makes a lot of sense. Led the entire league by like 5 targets last week with 15. He looked great. He's going to have a different quarterback either way throwing him the ball this week. If it's Josh Johnson, you feel confident. They're probably not going to have Saeed Blacknall. Trey McBride's questionable, so Spruce should still be the guy. But if it's Jalen McClendon, playing a $10,400 Nelson Spruce is extremely scary. Second most expensive player on the slate, second only to quarterback Philip Walker. And then at that point, it's on Sunday's slate, so you already missed out on potentially pivoting to McCall McKay, who's $200 less. Eli Rogers is a few $100s less, right? So this slate gets sketchy for a lot of people if Josh Johnson doesn't start, and we don't get that news until tonight or tomorrow morning. Because if he doesn't start, Nelson Spruce becomes a much worse play. At that point, I would rather have a lot more guys and a lot more interest in other players. Now you can pivot to the Houston players at that point tomorrow. All their wide receivers will be there. Maybe you're already owning them, though. You can pivot to Jeff Badet in that same game at wide receiver. You can leave a lot of money on the table, go Flynn Nagel. So there's obviously options to pivot away from, just not as secure options, or at least the best, I would say. So QB, I'm tentatively expecting Josh Johnson to start. That's what the reports say right now. Any interest in the showdown slates? Also, Thompkins is listed as a reserve. Are you concerned? Yeah, I have no interest in DeAndre Thompkins now, Zach Jameson. Showdown slates, I'm not playing. Look, I think you have a better edge in XFL Showdown than NFL Showdown, yes, but the edges in Showdown in general, no matter how much information you have, are pretty terrible, because if you don't have the 4th string receiver who catches a touchdown on his only catch in that game, you could pinpoint the 4-game slate absolutely right, and that doesn't matter. The guy's got 6 fantasy points, a catch for 2 yards and a touchdown. But on the showdown slate, that's costing you winning any major money. So I don't really have much interest in trying to play the showdowns. If they were bigger prize pools, I might. But yeah, I think the 4-game slates, the 2-game slates are even okay. But I'm mainly sticking to the 4-game slates. I watched a couple of streams. Yours is the most informative. You're doing awesome. Number 1 in my book. Thank you. I appreciate that, Crimson Type. Thank you. Appreciate that. Jojo says, yes, I do about 5 hours a day on NBA alone. This isn't fluid enough yet. I do trust you, Sal, but I'd like to have good grip on it myself. I'll keep learning here for now. That makes a ton of sense. Yeah, you should not be putting your money behind anything if you don't officially trust it. Like, trusting people blindly is, I would say, a small percentage of being okay, but like having a grasp of what's happening yourself and being able to also interpret other people's opinions, objective data, and put your own subjective, but subjective not meaning bias, just human reasoning, into some of your decisions you're making. So yeah, 5 hours a day on the NBA at this point. Since I make content for it, I probably spend that much time on it, but the process for me is pretty fluent now in terms of weighting ownership, in terms of having it all automated at that point. Having some trouble picking my flex spots. What position should I load up on? First time running XFL. Don't know if I should treat like NFL. What's going on, Max? Yeah, welcome. So I guess I'll ask throughout the show. Let me know how many people are watching, and also if you could hit the subscribe button, it helps out a ton. Totally free. And yeah, trying to get to 20,000 subscribers. We're like less than 800 away now, so pretty cool. But I prefer wide receivers. I made that pretty evident last week. I rostered 95% of my lineups had only one running back in the running back position. 5% of my lineups had one running back in the flex. None of my lineups had three running backs. I have zero interest in playing more than one running back this week. I have the rule still set at most two, with some constraints on that. So I might get 1 to 2 running backs in a ton of lineups in the flex, but I strongly prefer wide receivers. You have a ton of these running backs working in, one, offenses that don't care about running the ball. The XFL prioritizes wide receivers in just the rules, the headsets, all that. So that's a couple of things. There's so many running backs by committees. Not a lot of these running backs are running routes. On average, I think the running backs are running like 14 routes on average. A couple broke free over 20, like 2 or 3. Some of those were in backfields where it's like Dallas, where Cameron Sardin-Payne had 22 routes run, but there's 4 running backs running routes in that backfield, so it's really tough to prioritize that. So yeah, wide receivers, guys who are going to run 30 routes out there and are priced half the price of some of these running backs are guys I would much prefer getting to. Just way more opportunity for them. I prefer running backs in the flex, or wide receivers in the flex. Would you go Joe Horn or Thompkins with the Thompkins news? Yeah, I don't want any Thompkins, so I guess I don't really have a take right now on Joe Horn, but I would prefer anybody over Thompkins that's going to be running routes. Thompkins is probably, if the depth chart news is accurate, if this foot injury is bothering him, you probably at that cheap price point, he's still fine to play. I think he runs 18 to 22 routes. I don't think he runs 30 plus. If he does, he's a fantastic play. But based on the news that came out, him being actively moved to the backup today behind Rashad Ross, I'd be concerned. I wouldn't want to be rostering him all that much. Like, look, you still have a major edge in the XFL if you're even tracking the Thompkins news compared to all the other people. I believe there might be overlay too as well. Yesterday I saw that the contests weren't filling as much, which is surprising on NBA weekend, so maybe that's not a good sign right now. But yeah, I would prefer really anybody over Thompkins at this point. Anybody who's going to start. Joe Horn is listed as a starter. He had a lot of opportunities last week, of course, 8 targets, 7 on some sites where we looked, but charting it, he had, I believe, 8. Yeah, I think he looks better than Thompkins. I heard you comment on the amount of edge that was there last week. Loads of edge last week. Do you receive this edge still available, or has it dissipated? It definitely hasn't dissipated. Not at all. No. There's a ton of edge out there because we're not going to find out injury news until right before. There's going to be people still trying to spend the entire salary cap today, when I think the most optimal way is to probably still have money left on the table. Not as much as last week, where you could have had $8,000 to $10,000 and had a great lineup left on the table, but yeah, there's still a strong edge out there. You don't have more people popping up with content. If anything, you have less people popping up with content because week 1 they either didn't do good themselves, or they think that they didn't get enough viewership to make it work. Like, places that I've seen do free content in terms of video and podcast format for DFS specifically that I would trust. And again, I make a lot of content. I do business in the background, so I guess I'm not the best resource to source this because I'm not typing in DFS Picks on YouTube like a lot of people who watch my content are. But I do the show with Osmo, so I know they're doing it, and then I know that I'm doing it. I know there's people behind paywalls probably releasing very good content, but free content, there's not a lot. There's not a lot of information out there. If you had somebody open up the XFL slate today that either played last week or is going to play for the first time this week, and you told them to build a lineup, and then you face them head to head, you would have a huge edge. And if you take that same edge and putting into tournaments and max out 3 maxes and 20 maxes and get a lot of lineups into 150 if you want, you will have a good edge. Yes. The edge has reduced since last week because now we have game logs, we have snap counts, and people who can look at that will use it and make content on it, but it has not dissipated by any means. The casual in an NFL week will know what the players are, what their roles are in the offense for the most part. There's not much edge left there. It's very variant. This is still very variant, especially if playing GPPs, but the casuals will open up the slate today, especially if they're playing for the first time, and still be rostering Cameron Sardin-Payne, and still be rostering Christian Michael. And not knowing what Jordan Ta'amu did last week, and not knowing who's starting at Tampa Bay and LA, right? They're just not going to know that stuff. I loaded up on wide receivers. Wrong decision? No, that seems about good. Do you see any benefit in paying up at running back? It depends on how you want to build lineups. Some lineups, I think you look pretty good at paying up for running back. I think there's running back plays all across the board. I'll go to the running back page right here. I currently think there's only 8 running backs in play. In any format, cash or GPP. You can talk me into one more maybe, depending on some injury news like Larry Ross. He's going to see more snaps with Juwan Harris out. But paying up for running back pretty much means you're playing who? Jarrell Presley or Devion Smith? I think they're both fine options if you want to get there. I think the 4K range is also really strong. Nick Holley, Lance Dunbar, Darius Victor. I think the next tier in the 6K range. So, like, paying up for running back probably means you're playing De'Veon Smith or Presley, I assume. Like, I don't consider Elijah Hood or James Butler in the 6K range pay-up options. So, I don't think there's anything wrong with playing Presley or De'Veon Smith. So, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with paying up. I don't have a strong stance on whether you want to pay up or not. It's specific to the lineup you're making. No really strong stance. I'm using both. These are guys that have in the player pool, both expensive and cheap running backs. On DK, do you find yourself using wide receivers in the flex more often than running backs? Yeah, I have a rule set not to use more than 2. I might actually make that lineup. I might actually make that rule set to just not even use running backs in the flex. Last week, I only had 5% of my lineups with running backs in the flex and only 1 running back, not 2. 95% of my lineups didn't have a running back in the flex. Ended up working out great. Obviously, that can change week to week, but if we look at the XFL for a full 10-game season, even factor in their postseason, I would assume that more times than not, winning lineups will have 1 running back in them, or at most 2 total. I like Joe Horn a lot because he's a slot wide receiver, and DC allowed a lot to the slot receiver Pro L. Yeah, that's a little bit noisy, though. So Joe Horn looked fine. He had the opportunity. Nothing terrible to say about him. He's dirt cheap for some reason. But to go off of last week's slot performance from Pro L against them, I think is a little bit too skewed in small sample. It's good to bring up when you're trying to make a point for him like you are, but Ultimate Sports Kid. But Pro L scored a 57-yard touchdown, 65% of his yardage on a catch and run that was a terrible tackle, and then one of the worst angles I've ever seen to a tackle by a defensive back ever. So that is very skewed. Like 65% of his yardage, you throw in the touchdown, even more of his production comes on the back of that. His quarterback play in Brandon Silvers is banged up / terrible. BJ Daniels can easily come in, and he's a mobile quarterback. Obviously, that's the case against Pro this week, but it's a little bit skewed when 65% of your yardage comes on a play that was one of the worst defensive plays of the week. And on the opposite side of that game, Kerry Lees or whatever, his touchdown, the tight end, was also one of the worst tackling efforts. He's slow as molasses, and he didn't even put a juke on. Just both defensive backs like fall on the ground. If you didn't see it, definitely go look. You won last week with a Guardian stack. Were you playing head-to-head? Because I didn't think the Guardians did that great. I mean, McGloin definitely wasn't a top 2 or 3 quarterback option. I guess Joe Horn did well if you had him. So you asked me Matt McGloin or Cardale Jones. I mean, just based on my quarterback interest, I don't have Matt McGloin marked as a interest all that much, so I would go Cardale Jones there. These are wide receivers. I have 16 players at wide receiver. You can tell me that there's a little bit more that are in play without a doubt. I currently have 16 players. Sports news alert over on Sportscaster. Follow me on Sportscaster if you have not already. Very cool technology on Sportscaster. That's just a little emblem that's in the top of my video. I've been partnered with them for about a year or so. But they're the first people on a streaming app that you can record your face and what's in front of you at the same time. So like if you're at a game, I don't know, baseball game, game today in DC, you can be recording yourself in the corner of the screen while recording the game. Pretty cool, both cameras at once. He asks, where can you play DFS XFL? You can play it on DraftKings, you can play it on FanDuel. I don't believe that FantasyDraft isn't offering it yet. Drafters is not. I don't believe that Super Draft or any of those are. So DraftKings and FanDuel you can play. I don't know if did FanDuel open up the 4-game slates? Their product is just gross, but for a lot of things. But DraftKings has 4-game slates. Sports news alert. I would recommend you going and checking out DraftKings if you are looking to play. I'm using Flynn Nagel just because he fits in my lineup. Is that all right? Yeah, I think Flynn Nagel is just a price really well. Like, you have a different quarterback who might throw down the field more, but Flynn Nagel secured this role really early on. 29 routes last week, 6 targets. Like, I think you can bank on Flynn Nagel for like a 5-target game every week. And then your upside is, oh, wow, Landry Jones likes him a lot. They're playing sort of a spread offense that they're going to be going air raid, short, quick passes last week. That can change, but seems like that's what Stoops wants to do. Then, yeah, Flynn Nagel, if he becomes the favorite target this week of Landry Jones, it could be a 10 upside day in terms of targets. So I think he's appropriately priced. I don't think there's anything terribly wrong with Flynn Nagel this week. Hey, Sal, how much money would you leave on the table? As much as your heart desires. You're just not going to leave as much as last week because you had so many wide receivers in the 3K range last week, and you had Philip Nelson at 78 or Philip Walker at 7,800, and obviously in a quarter of the field's lineups, he looked fantastic. He's priced up, right? But You have Teamu priced up a little bit. But I'm fine leaving multiple $1,000s on the table this week. Like, the difference is that, like, somebody just asks, oh, I like playing Flynn Nagel. That's fine. The difference between leaving no money and leaving $2,000 to $3,000 on the table is playing Donald Parham over Flynn Nagel, right? His teammate, tight end, who's going to run similar routes, maybe a little bit more deeper routes for $3,000 less, right? And there's no wrong decision in playing Donald Parham over Flynn Nelson, in my opinion, this week, and you put $3,000 on the table. So, and you might have already had $1,000 on the table. So I really don't have a limit. If you have $5,000 on the table this week, I don't think you're making wrong decisions. There's like 4 to 5 guys in the 3K range that seem very viable to me this week, and if you're playing 1 to 2 of them, you're probably gonna have a lot of money left over. Where can you play DFS for free? I mean, I'm assuming DraftKings still does free contests. They used to do just zero buy-in head-to-heads and things like that. Miami cares all day, so I would recommend checking out DraftKings and FanDuel. Okay, so this is the same person, I believe. He asked, where can you play DFS for free, also on Sportscaster. Yeah, DraftKings and FanDuel. You can't win prizes, though. I mean, sometimes they do free rolls, but not usually. You can just play for free. Like, if you win, you're just winning for bragging rights and fun to watch the game, like a week-to-week. That's just fantasy league, but that's about it. Where do you follow XFL news? I can't find it anywhere. I personally have a couple of personal sources that I established before the season started a little bit, discussing stuff that they have with the teams. XFL News Hub has some really good articles. I mean, it's just as simple as I follow the statistics after the fact on PFF, on a couple of other sites. I tried charting some of my own plays as well from games. A couple of my own individual sources. Twitter is fine with news. I made a list of like 30 or 40 names to follow on Twitter for XFL news. So yeah, it's not easy, especially before the season started. You're literally going on Google. You're literally trying to find the sources that you see as reasonable, and you're reading as much as you can. For the preseason, I was reading like 4 hours of just Twitter and Twitter lists and notes a week, or a day, not a week, in the mornings and throughout the days. But yeah, the XFL website has some articles as well that are pretty decent from beat reporters, and yeah. And then it's just establishing connections before the season started with some of these beat writers / people that cover the league, and trusting their opinion since they're there with the team. I really like the Jones and Bidette combo. Is there any better? I don't know what you mean if there's any better, but Jones and Bidette, they're probably going to go lower owned than most quarterback wide receiver combinations this week. So I think it looks fine. So I love to hear the grind. You ought to help us win money. Yeah, no problem, Jake. I love doing this. It's fun. I like them. So like, I like WNBA, preseason NFL, and XFL the most. Not only is it still the most profitable, I think, sports in DFS, and a little bit less variant when you're talking about the WNBA, but I like the idea that not a lot of people produce content. So like the podcast version of my YouTube show is currently like gravitating between 15th and 30th. Today it was like 27th or 21st. So that's cool because I'm putting out content and there's just no NFL, and PGA's already started. So it's like lulls in terms of getting viewership and growing. And then I just like the grind of like creating storylines before they happen. What's up? What's going on, Buckeye Philly? He says, what's up, Sal? Great work. Number one content provider I found for XFL. Big fan from the Awesemo shows. Keep it up. Thank you. I appreciate you, man. Yeah. Definitely check out the Awesemo stream that Spags and I did yesterday. Also, the one thing I will point out, PFF has 0 routes run for Elijah Hood. A couple of people reached out on Twitter and said that they had him at 24. I don't know if they were self-charting. I don't know if they were using some other data source, and then he was on the field out wide often. So if you put Elijah Hood at 20 routes run, he goes from a guy that I didn't have as much interest in to a guy that I have a good amount of interest in, like top 5 RB interest this week. So that's worth pointing out. Like in the video, I said that he didn't run any routes. I was going off of PFF. They still have him. Apparently, they have, looking at other data sources, they have only Elijah Hood wrong, which makes sense that he played 55 snaps. It would seem odd that he doesn't run a route, but that's what they had him at. At the end of the day, it's best for people to do their own research. Yeah, it would be best, but this is the issue. You can't, right? Like, if you're working a 9 to 5, and like my average viewers, 80% of my viewers are between the ages of 25 and 50. And like 50% of those are between the ages of like 35 and 55. So most of those people are probably married with kids, and they're all males. It's like 99.9. If you're working 9 to 5, you get up at 8, you're obviously not doing anything in the mornings, you get home at 5, you commute, you eat dinner, you do stuff with your kids, it's 8 p.m., I'm doing, on average, I don't know, a week, 20 hours of XFL research. When you factor in looking at statistics and trying to dig through those as well, 30 to 40 hours of XFL research a week, a full-time job, like it is best for people to do their own research because you would feel, like I feel right now, pretty confident about today, pretty confident about last week, but you just can't. Like this is my job. Like if you're working a 9-to-5 job and you think you can do enough research without using any other sources of content, mine, any of the paid sites, Awesome's, then you are probably working like 120-hour weeks or 100-hour weeks. Do you think James Butler makes a repeat performance from week 1? I think he's very sketchy. I think he's in play. I have him listed here in play. But, like, here's the thing. D'Angelo Henderson left early in the first quarter. D'Angelo Henderson is not playing today. So that's good, right? James Butler had 44 snaps, 36 more than Andre Williams. So he should, by all accounts, be the lead back today. He also scored 2 touchdowns on 11 touches. And I think he, by all accounts, is probably going to be his best performance of the season. This team doesn't want to run the ball. This team doesn't want to throw the ball to running backs. He only ran 8 routes in about 3.5 quarters of play or something. So even if you give him 10 routes run, below the average of about 15 from week 1, Andre Williams ran 1 route. Butler at 6,300 looks a lot like Elijah Hood. Elijah Hood sucked last week. I imagine the ownership is lower. Butler, I imagine, sees very similar usage in terms of the carries. Butler probably sees somewhere around 10, maybe 12 carries. I'm skeptical. He was on the field in the red zone, but I'm skeptical that you might see Andre Williams come in for some red zone snaps. Either way, at the end of the day, Butler was very good last week. Game log watchers will put him in over a guy like Elijah Hood, and Elijah Hood apparently ran about double the amount of routes as Butler last week. So there's a lot of guys you can say the same thing about this week. Darius Victor, right? 70% of the workload compared to Tim Cook. That could easily flop. Butler and Elijah Hood look like the guys who have the strongest grasp on their individual backfields. Jarrell Presley pretty close as well, although he only played 10 more snaps than El Pemfrey, 75% of the carries. But Butler and Hood look really similar to me, and if I had to project ownership, I would assume Butler comes in higher. He's in an offense that does not care about running backs, clearly doesn't care about tight ends. They have none on the team. So do I think Butler can be in winning lineups today at 6,300? Yes, he's going to touch the ball 10 to 12 times, upside of like 14 to 15 in probably the best offense that we've seen so far in this league. So he has upside. I just don't think it's as secure as a lot of people probably think if they're just looking at game logs last week. Thoughts on Pumphrey starting? Yeah, he got the start last week, but he ended up seeing less snaps than Presley, less touches by a wide margin. Presley ended up with, I believe, 75% of the touches. The DC offensive line just looked terrible in general, so Presley would be the guy I go to there. The price tag at $7K makes it a little bit more less appealing, and that offensive line, one thing that I did on Tuesday and Wednesday really a lot was just look at all the offensive lines. The biggest thing coming into the season was, for me, defensive line versus offensive line matchups would be scary. Like offensive lines, you need chemistry. You need a ton of snaps together. They played 1 preseason game, right? So a lot of these offensive lines looked bad. DC's was probably looking the worst. They didn't open up any running lanes, and they really did not do much for Cardale Jones. He was pressured on 38% of his dropbacks, only kept clean 62% of the time for a guy who's pretty big-bodied and somewhat mobile. Decently mobile. It's concerning. So, yeah, the DC offensive line looked a little bit worrisome. I'm getting a lot of Darius Victor in my crunches. What's your thoughts on him? Thanks. I would prefer him to Tim Cook. He played 70 points. He got 70.6% of the snaps last week. He's cheap. He ran like 10 routes and had 3 targets on them. So I think he overproduced in his receiving game last week. So if you're going to weight that anyway, I think that might not be great. Like expecting him to see 3 receptions on 10 routes run is probably not something you're going to get from most of these backs. But he did seem to be the guy working as the backup. Only 2 running backs used in New York between Cook and Victor that I would prefer in New York. So yeah, he is the cheapest that I would go at running back this week at 4,100. That lead play was hilarious. Yeah, it was gross. It was so bad. Catches a ball wide open on the double flea flicker. Really cool. Well, good for the XFL, right? It created just shockwaves pretty early on from a double flea flicker, whatever it was. But the man catches the ball wide open, sure. 2 guys just like dive. Like literally just dive on the floor and don't even attempt to tackle the guy. Terrible. Are those rankings your favorite to least favorite? No. Everything you're seeing on the screen right now is not filtered by anything. Not favored by favorite to least favorite. It is just me going in here and putting X's by their names and then just factoring it by the X's and N's. If you want my specific rankings and tiers, I'll call it out once again for people that are in here now. I have Patreon linked up down below. Every single position, I have tiers and rankings for exactly who I would play ahead of who. I also have a podcast on there that gets in depth about my interests today. A little bit more in depth than this is going to be. This is just sort of like a player pool interest base. But yeah, Patreon is where you want to go for that. You can sign up on Patreon, link down below. XFL Priority and or the Hall of Fame tiers will get you those or the Hall of Fame membership will get you the Patreon rankings and tiers. They went out yesterday morning. Based on the injury report that came out last night and some of the news that came out, me doing more research, they have been changed a little bit throughout the day yesterday. Made final adjustments this morning while shooting the podcast at like 6 a.m., 6:15 a.m. East Coast time. Top salary savers, cheap options. Yeah, so I mean, running backs, just these guys that are listed here. Holly's 48, Dunbar's 46, Victor's 41. I think those are cheap, viable options. Wide receiver, you have a lot. You have Horn at 34, Tolliver at 39, with a potential backup quarterback, but still cheap enough. Ran 40 routes last week. Looked pretty decent. Believe he was targeted 7 times and overthrown on a touchdown pass. Donald Parham, tight end, 3,200. He's in play. Trey McBride, if he's active, at 4,000, with likely no Saeed Blacknall because he's doubtful this week. After Blacknall ran 43 routes last week, McBride I would expect to get in the mix. Adonis Jennings is still listed as a starter at 3K flat. Another cheap option for you, although wasn't used that heavily last week. Damian Washington is probably the St. Louis receiver I like the most. Ran the most routes, looked like the most wide receiver ready. Had a couple of deep targets as well. Had a couple of screen targets as well, so it kind of drops down all the deep yardage that you're going to see for him. But 5 targets. Those are cheap options. Marcus Lucas as well in St. Louis, a tight end that ran as a wide receiver for the most part. Those are cheap options. Quarterback play, there's really not any cheap guys this week. Like Philip Walker was the cheat code last week at a cheap price. Jordan Tam was like the cheapest guy that I would want to get to this week at 8,900. Don't think there's anything wrong. So those are all the cheap options. Like whatever, like these X's are just my interests right now. They're not ranked in any way here on YouTube. They are on Patreon. Take the June Jones offense and cash every week. Yeah, so Houston. Yeah, I mean, that seems like a pretty decent idea, right? From what they did last week, they pretty much said, we're going to spread it wide and we're just going to throw the ball deep, right? Threw the ball 11 times deep, 30%, about 28.9% of Philip Walker's dropbacks were deep passes. Crazy. FanDuel has 4 games now. Well, finally, that's good because their 2 games contest did not fill last week. And I'm sure they tried to blame the XFL, but then they looked at DraftKings and was like, DraftKings filled, and then actually had a 20,000 to first contest right after that. Crazy. I'll probably play the Sunday slate for DraftKings because I think there's a lot more. The Sunday slate looks so much better. Like a lot of my lineups are probably going to have like 1 to 3 guys at most playing today overall in the 2 games, right? You have just the best teams on the slate tomorrow, potentially Dallas, Houston, St. Louis. St. Louis and Houston is going to be actually a fun game. The 2 best quarterbacks from week 1, in my opinion. Yes, Cardinal Jones, statistically wise, looked the best, or maybe one of the best. But if you're talking about fantasy wise, Jordan Ta'amu, exciting. Didn't have to throw that much. Phil Walker, very exciting, right? So I'm actually looking forward to that. They did a good job moving the times back to 6 p.m. Eastern time for that night game on Sunday, a little bit more prime time. And I don't know if they scheduled it that way, like changed the matchups. I don't know if it was always supposed to be St. Louis and Houston last, but makes sense that they made that their big prime time game. Should I make more lineups with Landry Jones or Ta'amu? Yeah, so I think Ta'amu offers you more upside this week because he's probably going to have to throw more against Houston, and he still has that rushing upside. But upside in terms of, I'll say Ta'amu offers you more security. Maybe not upside is the right word, whereas Landry Jones is uncertainty. He's probably lower owned in tournaments. People are going to pay up either for Jones or I would imagine Walker or go down to Ta'amu. I think Landry Jones is a good GPP play. I think he's good in all formats at that price point, but I think the fact that people don't know what to expect from him keeps him a little bit more lower owned. Whereas last week coming in, before we knew about Philip Walker and Jordan Ta'amu, Landry Jones might have been the highest owned quarterback on the slate. So he's going to go from the highest owned to maybe an afterthought today. Jeremy Dornick asks, who's your top quarterback, your top 2 running backs, and your top wide receiver salary savers? Jeremy Dornick, I do not build lineups here for you. I do have all of those ranked position by position on Patreon, but I am not in the business of discussing who is my favorite play at every single position in a sport where there's only 4 games per week. So I in A for effort, but I do have favorites at every position, but not something that's going to be offered here. Why not Thompkins? He is listed now as the backup. They actively made the conscious decision to put Rashad Ross ahead of him on the depth chart yesterday. That's concerning. Coming off of a foot injury, that's concerning. We saw similar things happen last week for a couple of players that ended up being ruled out. Thompkins is now probable. So, I mean, you can still get to Thompkins. It's just, if I now know the news that not a lot of people will know, that Thompkins, yes, was the starter last week, but as of yesterday, listed as a backup, that's a little bit concerning. Rashad Ross learning the offense more snaps for him. My interest in Thompkins has gone from one of my favorite plays in the slate to somebody I would be fine having 0% of. Who's your favorite 4 wide receivers? Yeah, no comment. Who is offense? Is June Jones offense? June Jones is a coach. He's a Houston Roughnecks coach, but a guy who just wants to throw the ball a ton for Houston. He's not a player. He's just a coach. Do you really like any Vipers wide receivers with the quarterback up in the air? Yeah, I think so. I mean, like Dan Williams with a price up is not as appealing anymore. Jalen Tolliver at a cheap price point is fine. Williams is still fine, but look, Aaron Murray was no world beater last week. I'm pretty sure he lives with Dan Williams, so that's not great for Dan Williams again. But yeah, I think you can get to Tampa Bay wide receivers. They're definitely not anywhere near the most appealing wide receivers on the slate, but I would have some in a player pool. Like Aaron Murray, this might be an upgrade if they actually start Taylor Cornelius. And Taylor Cornelius had a really good senior year at Oklahoma State. Obviously, the downside is if they use a little bit more of Quinn Flowers, who's going to just be a wildcat type of guy. Do you have a lineup generator for XFL? I don't have my own lineup generator. I use third parties. Love the WNBA. Yeah, WNBA is great. If anybody watching this is a worker in the WNBA or knows somebody who works or plays in the WNBA, tell them to hit me up so that we can develop some sort of partnership to get their marketing better, whether it's through my videos specifically or me helping them in the back end with my media company, because their marketing is absolutely brutal. Their social media presence is non-existent. The marketing of their players is non-existent. The avenues like YouTube channels and podcasts is non-existent. The fact that they can't even get TV deals and now they're just offering paid-for content for TV is a step forward, right? Buying like a $10 a month pass to watch all the WNBA games is a paid-for step forward, but not a lot of people want to watch them, let alone pay $10 a month to watch them. Make it for free. Get people in. But there's a lot I can say about the WNBA's marketing. It is a league that has a ton of promise and a ton of great athletes. The people on Twitter who like to put on the comment sections, I forgot who it was, Ogun Boale or somebody in the WNBA posted a pretty funny tweet, but pretty much saying like there's so many guys in the comments that say that they can beat these WNBA players one-on-one. There is zero chance. Unless you went to a D1 college and played at Duke or UNC, maybe you have a shot, but beating professional women who are freak athletes, random people on Twitter, you're not going to do that. Is Sammy Coates going to be uber chalk again this week? Burnt a lot of people last week, but the casuals noticed his name, so I'd imagine he's going to be popular again. Keith Ford out, Matt Jones questionable, listed as starters. Yeah, right now it's just Keith Ford is out. Matt Jones is questionable, but expected to play. I expect Matt Jones to resume the split to workhorse backload there. Not reading too much into that depth chart for Michelle, unless Matt Jones is ruled out. Eric Johnson is one of our only 5% of over 55-year-olds watching. There you go, Eric. What's up, my man? Is Holly a good running back, or do I consider anyone else? Holly is a wide receiver that is labeled as a running back, so he's a wide receiver in the best passing situation in the league. I think he's fine. Yeah, so Holly plays wide receiver. Ran 27 of his routes at wide receiver last week. Saw 5 targets, 4 receptions. Nice catch down the field. He's cheap enough so that if he sees 5 or 6 targets at 4,800, he's surely in play. Is your wide receiver list in order of preference? No, that is listed in tiers on Patreon. My wide receiver list is not listed in any type of order of preference. If I filter this by price, it will make a lot of these no's pop up. So I filtered it by Y's and S's. I don't know what Google Sheets filters by after that. It might be filtering it by whatever's in the first word of this column, first letter of this column. I have no idea. So I'll say that once again. What you're seeing on this YouTube channel, when you're seeing the X's, is just a player pool. You are not seeing a single player that none of these players are ranked at all yet. Wide receiver is not ranked either. They are just 16 players that I have interest in at wide receiver, 8 at running back, and 4 at quarterback currently. Ranked over on Patreon, if indeed interested. Do you like Tampa Bay wide receivers with the QB up in the air? Yeah, I think they're still in play. They're nowhere near as solid because I don't even care that Murray's out. He's not that great. The downside is that Quinn Flowers might play a lot more, and by all accounts, he's going to be much more of a rushing and mobile player and quarterback. Hey Sal, Joe Horn or Jalen Tolliver, kind of a toss-up. I don't really have a strong stance on either of them. They were both used in very similar spots in both their offenses. Joe Horn probably has the better quarterback, but he's further down on the depth chart. Jalen Tolliver, quarterback up in the air, but higher up on the depth chart, more of a priority probably. I have very equal amounts of both of them. Who is starting for Seattle at quarterback? It's Brandon Silvers for Seattle. Seattle is starting Brandon Silvers. If you're asking Tampa Bay, it's going to be split between Taylor Cornelius and Quentin Flowers today. But Seattle is Brandon Silvers, probably the worst quarterback after 1 week of football, not named Philip Nelson. So going into this week, he's probably the worst quarterback. At the end of the day, this is all luck. I very strongly disagree with that. There's a large factor of any DFS game mode that is luck, but you are not Osimo or Chipotle or the top players in the world and profiting continuously. I profit at DFS. You're not doing that based on luck. If you were, you are very few amounts of people that are blindly making lineups and winning. Strong amounts of DFS are luck, but it's about putting yourself in the position to get lucky, like anything else. If a year and a half ago I sat on my couch every day and said, I'll get lucky, I'll somehow be a full-time content creator making DFS, I'll just get lucky. No, that's not how it works. You don't get lucky to be doing what I'm doing and what everybody else in the DFS industry is doing. You put in work and you open yourself up to the opportunity to get exposure, similar to DFS, and put yourself in those situations that in DFS you big contests, in your work, people notice you and give you a shot. Shout out Osmo, shout out Pat Mayo. What percentage owns do you think Walker comes in at? It's a good question. Really not seeing any ownership projections for XFL yet. Makes sense. Not a lot of history on it. If I had to guess Walker's ownership with Landry Jones in, it'll be a little bit lower, but I'd expect Walker to be the highest owned quarterback. If I had to take a wild guess at what his ownership is, I'd say it should be somewhere around 50%. I'll say it comes in the 40% range. Low 40s. It should be like 50%, but I'll say people don't jump on quick enough. Price point up limits it a little bit. Robert Boyce says Aaron Rodgers is a top play. There you go. What QB is the most turnover prone? I mean, probably Brandon Silvers. Probably Brandon Silvers. Obviously, Cornelius and Quentin Flowers are not seasoned by any means. If Josh Johnson is out, the top play on the slate at defense probably becomes Dallas, with Jalen McClendon going to be playing and probably throwing 3 to 4 interceptions if he stays in that long. Nick Trudell fumbled, had an iffy game, and Murray is out. But was the team's top draft pick? How do you like him? Yeah, Trudell, the tight end, fumbled. They returned it for a touchdown last week, New York. I mean, he's priced where he should be, so I don't have as much interest in Trudell. Really not that much player pool for me right now. He's just priced where he should be. High 6K range for a tight end who saw the targets. I would expect him to see similar usage in the red zone, which yet to be seen if they can convert, but I imagine he'll be a priority there. Not a priority for me, though, Nick Trudell. Jake Powell or Thompkins in the showdown slate? I honestly don't know their prices. That's tough because like Powell, I really don't have much interest in that tight end. Probably sees another 3 or 4 targets at best. Maybe you risk it with Thompkins there, but both of those options seem pretty gross. I caught the tail end of your Thompkins comment. Would you mind repeating? Yeah, no problem, man. Thompkins was listed as the backup. Rashad Ross was listed as the starter, so I no longer have any sort of priority interest or even really secondary interest in DeAndre Thompkins. He was listed as the backup on the depth chart, so he went from being a top priority of mine, a strong interest of mine at that price point, to might be running as the wide receiver 4, might be running half the routes as a lot of other guys this week in that price range, so not going to get there. Sal, does a double fantasy... This is a good question. What's up, Sal? How does the double forward pass affect fantasy scores? Do 2 people get credit? No. So if I am to throw the ball to you and then you are the one who throws it downfield, only you get credited with the yardage, the passing yardage. The first player, who is usually the quarterback, will not. So I hope that makes sense. But that's a really good question. Only the player who's affected by the double forward pass. And I don't think we really saw any last week. So I don't think it's going to become that big of a factor. The XFL has its own YouTube channel, as it should. Definitely as it should. Only the player making the second pass gets credit. Exactly, Victor. Thank you. Yes. Hey, Sal, in your tiers, would you say the tier 3 would be the start of your GPP rankings, asks Ed. Ed, good question. So I mentioned in the podcast today, the top tiers that I have for cash on Patreon are also strong plays for GPPs. The tiers where you start to get tier 3 and tier 4 are guys that I would really only try and be playing in GPPs. So the reason that I create more tiers on the cash game tiers on Patreon is to give you ideas of who else is in a player pool for me and where they would rank. So yes, like tiers 3 through 4 would be like the interest in GPPs that I have, but you can easily play any of those guys. It's just more of like a longer player pool for GPPs. Who do you prefer from the Houston Big 3? Or who do you like most to pivot off of Coates, Lewis or Cam? Khalil Lewis plays out of the slot, and he was priced up majorly, so I don't have as much interest in Khalil Lewis. Like, different positions with Nick Holley, because Nick Holley's for some reason still listed as a running back, but Khalil Lewis is double the price as Nick Holley. They're probably going to run the same amount of routes. I don't get it. So I would prefer Phillips, Holly, and Coates all ahead of Cleo Lewis. Did you cash last week? Yes, I did. Last week I had about $2,000 in play, and it was either 3.4x or 3.7x. But it was a very good week. It was a very good first week. Had a ton of money in cash games, played every single tournament that you possibly could, had action down on a few sites. 217 are currently watching and only 29 likes. It's sad, guys. Sal does an amazing job and deserves the credit. Close your chat. Hit that like button. Then reopen the chat. Yeah, so I appreciate that, David. Very nice of you. Very nice of you. Yeah, hit the like button if you'd like. It helps the video a little bit. Like, I would say like maybe 1%. Like buttons don't help as much anymore, especially on live streams. They kind of act as like a what's the word? Like a review for that video. Like if people themselves look at the like buttons, which not a lot of people do, as a way to, should I watch this video or not, more people look at viewership and subscribers. So hit the subscribe button because watch time is the thing that matters most. If you're still watching this on the replay for some reason, be sure to check out my Patreon. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Everybody watching this should follow me on Twitter. I'm posting a lot of updates there statistic-wise for NFL or XFL, lots of other stuff, working on some NFL projects in the background currently. Who lined you up? Yeah, I'm in Raleigh. Damn good barbershops here. Puerto Rican barbershop, I would like to say, or maybe it was Dominican, either or. I'm not positive the actual nationality there, but very good barbershop. His name is The Monster. Yeah, once we hit 20,000, I'll have to do a big giveaway. Somebody asked. I assume we're going to be by the end of the day, hopefully like 700 subscribers away from 1,000. Or 20,000. I just want to get to 20,000. For some reason, it just seems like a pretty cool goal. Obviously, it's a pretty big, just round number. Wholesome, I've said a couple times. But yeah, hit the subscribe button. Tell your friends, your brother, your mother, your sister. Share this on Twitter. I appreciate all that. Speaking of Twitter, let me see if anybody's mentioned anything news-wise. Yeah, so my guess today is that the XFL's ratings go down. Hopefully not a ton. They're definitely going to go down. I think they're going to go down a decent percentage, like 10% plus, but hopefully not a ton. At least for the first game. What's up, Sal? How much salary remaining is too much this week? Yeah, I don't really have a strong stance on that again. Like last week I had lineups with $8K left over. More than that. This week, like if you have 4,000 or 5,000 left over, it's hard to say that you're playing the wrong way. Like it's the difference between playing a $5,000 wide receiver and one of the really great $3,000 wide receivers this week. So if you have lineups at $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 even, I think they're okay. I think this is a week where you don't need to do that as much because the pricing's a little bit more efficient. We now know what these players' roles are like, but there's still enough value out there, especially at wide receiver, that I think you can leave a few thousand on the table and feel good. Do you think Walker should be faded in GPPs? No. Nope. If you want to play 100% Philip Walker, by all means, go ahead and do so. That offense looked superior than any other offense we saw last week by a wide margin. And I don't think it was a fluke. So fading Philip Walker in GPPs, yes, I think there's other good quarterback options this week in a lot of them. Ta'amu, Jones, Cardell Jones, Landry Jones and Cardell, but fading him seems a little bit steep. Can we see the wide receivers page? Yes, you may. How much stacking would you do? Is a quarterback and two wide receivers from one team too much? No, I think that's fine. Yeah, I think stacking is fine. Like obviously the lineup construction for the XFL format is different with the flexes, only one running back. I think stacking should still be a priority in terms of if you're playing a quarterback, you better have at least one of his pass catchers with him. It only makes sense. Having Philip Walker last week and none of his pass catchers didn't add up for you. Now, if you want to kind of play devil's advocate, Jordan Ta'amu had a fine game last week. He ran for 77 yards on the ground. You don't need to stack as much with Jordan Ta'amu, but I still would want to. Yeah, you should be playing at least one pass catcher with a quarterback. In some offenses, I'm fine. Like if you wanted to play Jeff Badette, Flynn Nagel, and Landry Jones today, I can't say anything bad about that. If you wanted to play Philip Walker and two of his pass catchers, I think that's a strong option. There's some teams that I wouldn't want to do it with, like Tampa Bay and Seattle, but I also want to be playing their quarterbacks. LA, if Josh Johnson starts and you want to pair him with Nelson, Spruce, and McBride if he starts, I can't say much bad about that. So, yeah, I think stacking, the only thing that I wouldn't do in stacking is running it back. I don't think you need to as much. Obviously, the correlation is great if one of these games pop off, but I'm just more worried about quarterbacks plus pass catcher stacks. I don't want to be running back or forcing in 4 players from one game when there's not that many roster spots, if that makes sense. It's still correlation-wise a very good method. Not a lot of people will do it, and it should help you out, but there's not that much time in your lineups, nor these games or the seasons, to really realize it. So I don't think you have to get that different in the XFL. That's a good question, though. I personally do not think Walker outscores the other quarterbacks 40 to 50% of the time. No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying if you think Walker comes in 40, 45% owned, it's not like the other quarterbacks are coming in 0% owned, right? So if you have, I don't know, Cardinal Jones coming in at 33% and Jordan Hamill coming in at 28% and Landry Jones coming in at 30%, the gap is not 40 to 50%. Like, it's not that he's that much higher owned than the rest of them. He's going to be coming in probably 10, 15% higher owned than the next quarterback, and I think there's a very strong margin of the time he outscores that gap. With Thompkins lower on the depth chart, does he get used in 3 wide receiver sets? I don't think so. Lower owned difference maker perhaps in a GPP. No, I don't want much Thompkins now. Listed as a backup, still cheap, but I don't think the ownership on him is like an edge anymore. Somebody says you're lagging. Am I lagging? I don't know. I'll be on for like another 5 minutes. Do you see Flowers and Cornelius splitting snaps? Asks Tyler White. Yes. Coach already said so. Mark Trestman already said that they're going to be splitting snaps. Are you considering starting more than one running back on DK being contrarian or sabotage? I'd say more sabotage. Like, I've had the same thoughts with myself. I don't think that more than one running back is that viable. Definitely not 3 running backs in a lineup does not seem viable. Even if it happens to win one of these weeks, that's 1 week out of the 10 or 12 with the postseason. But not enough people in these contests are thinking about it that way. They're not thinking, oh, I shouldn't play Elijah Hood and Jarrell Presley and Nick Holley at running back all in my same lineup. They're not thinking that like the upside is crushing them. People in this chat are, but that's 300, 400 people at most out of the tens of thousands of people in these contests. So I think that the better edge is not playing a lot more running backs. If this week 2 running backs are in the winning lineup, that's fine. Long term, I do not think you're going to see multiple running backs in winning lineups. Week 1, you did not. What's going on, Bama, Texas? How you doing? Brandon Silvers didn't look that bad to me. He looked pretty bad. I think you can pay down for him. Why the negativity? Oh, no negativity. I mean, I'm just looking at the stats. The 3 touchdown passes, 2 on just broken plays, are not what I want to look at. Brandon Silvers, terrible when under pressure, terrible when kept clean in terms of accuracy. Quarterback rating was not great. Yards per attempt was atrocious. Not much upside there for Brandon Silvers, a guy who was pulled in that game for a few plays for B.J. Daniels, and I would not be shocked to see that happen again. Also has, without a doubt, the worst pass catcher surrounding him and the worst coaching staff surrounding him. Sal, Lance Dunbar, question mark. Yeah, he's the only thing from that backfield in Dallas that I would touch. It's concerning, though, that there's 4 running backs that played 14-plus snaps, so it's really hard to like Lance Dunbar a ton, but I think he's okay. Run back with Spruce or Smallwood in a Dallas stack? Spruce, but if Josh Johnson is out, I wouldn't want any of them. Sal, your thoughts on the QB situation in LA? Basically, is Spruce in play? I'm expecting Josh Johnson to start, so with that, I think Spruce is in play. If Josh Johnson doesn't start, it sucks because you missed out on the first 2 games of Eli Rogers, McCall McKay. Other guys you can replace him with, but you do have the Houston guys and Jeff Badette to get off of Spruce with. But I would not want to be playing Spruce if Josh Johnson doesn't play. Not because of Josh Johnson not playing. We saw Kanoff had a fine game with Spruce last week, but because Jalen McClendon looked absolutely atrocious last week. Oh, yeah, no hat today. Just realized it. Yeah. Definitely. Subliminal Production says, good work as always, Sal. Your professionalism will take you a long way. Keep it up. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, man, it's fun that the XFL is here and people are enjoying it because, I mean, no NFL, it's like peak season is obviously like the first 8 to 10 weeks of NFL season, some of the playoffs. But I want to try and produce other content. Obviously, NBA is still going out but maybe season-long NFL, something that videos that can pop off from a viewership standpoint, right? A video that can pop off and get 60,000 views, right? Instead of like a daily 4,000 to 5,000 view count. It's more sustainable when it's daily like that, and obviously you have people coming back. But I think like preseason NFL videos, not about preseason football, but like in July, like, running back rankings, those types of videos will be important. Trying to work more on those. Hey Sal, if you're winning $100,000 at the end of the day today, are you doing it wrong? ? What does that mean? So you're saying like to win $100,000 today, you have to think like and like play wrong players? No, I don't think you're doing it wrong if you win $100,000. I think that the ideas that I have about this slate today, personally with the research that I've done, I think they're sound ideas. And then obviously you put yourself in place to get lucky. You do work, and then at the end of the day, you open yourself up to be lucky. Spag said that McBride is out. He's currently questionable. McBride has not been ruled out yet. Currently questionable. Do you ever see DK go to the super flex with XFL or NFL so you can use 2 quarterbacks? I don't know. I've thought about that sometimes. They might make a game mode for that. I don't know how they think it would go over. But obviously, if it does, you want to get in early on how much that affects the slate, if you should be playing 2 quarterbacks or not. For the XFL, it definitely would affect the slate. You're pretty much locking in like 2 guys at 20-plus points. Holly really isn't a running back, though. Yeah, no, he's not. He's listed as a running back. He did not play a single snap in the backfield last week. Is there an XFL Super Bowl? Yeah, I think it's in Houston, maybe. Their quote-unquote championship game. It seemed like there were more plays per game in the XFL last week compared to the NFL. Did you notice that during your research? I charted some of these games. Not really, no. So in theory, there should have been more plays because they have a shorter snap count. So just naturally, there should be more plays. And the clock is always moving. So it's a faster pace of play. But that's not what we saw last week. We just saw a lot of bad offenses. So it was just a situation where they just didn't get a lot of plays off. New York was just running the clock down. So in theory, there should be more plays in the XFL. But at the end of the day, when you have bad offenses, communication issues, whatever it is, and maybe this will get better as the season goes on, I think you're going to see very similar plays being run at the same pace as the NFL. Now, some of the teams ran 70 plays. Some of them ran nowhere near that. So similar to the NFL. In theory, it should be more, but they're just not that good. Just tuned in. Sorry if you already mentioned it. No problem, Brett. How do you feel about James Butler? I think with no D'Angelo Henderson, he's going to be in an offense that doesn't care about throwing to the running back, doesn't care about running the ball. His 2 touchdowns last week probably skew his ownership. I think he's fine at 6,300. I just don't think he's like an over-the-top priority play today. He's very similar to Elijah Hood for me. Elijah Hood, same price point. Going to see similar touches on the ground. Ran double the routes last week. So James Butler is just a meh play. Like I think I would rather not play James Butler in a GPP than play him. I think that's a good way to put it. Do I think he's out of play? No, but do I think he's one of the first 2 names that people click on, if not the first name that people click on to put in their GPP lineups because of last week's results? Yes, and that artificially bumps up his ownership higher than it should be. Every piece of ownership that comes in on a player makes him a much worse play in GPPs than players that don't have that ownership, and I think he would be a guy with higher ownership today. Sal, you should start NHL DFS, Sal. I just have no time. If I hired other people and made this more of like a instead of a personal brand, a company brand, maybe, but I don't really want to do that. Like I cover NBA, XFL right now, and PGA. They're like balancing the 3 is difficult enough. No way I can cover NHL. Has by far the smallest player pools. And from what I can understand, not that fun of a sport to play. Pro L too expensive this week? Yeah, he's grossly expensive. 65% of his receiving yards coming on 1 broken play pretty much last week with the worst quarterback in the league probably throwing him the ball this week. $9,200 is a gross price tag. Love for you, dude. Still waiting to make my first milli. There you go, Indy. Not sure if it will be in DFS. Probably not. Not having much luck, but it's a ton of fun and cheap. Bound to be more in stocks. Yeah, I mean, stocks you're going to get double your money every 7 years if you're in proper funds. So if you're investing early, if you're a 20-year-old watching this right now, get your ass out of debt. Hopefully I'll be out of student debt in about a month or 2, probably end of April, which will be great. At 23, can't wait. Then I'm going to invest 20% of my income or so every single year. And yeah, if you're a 20-year-old watching this right now, the biggest advice I can give you, get yourself out of debt, whatever it takes, work your ass off, get yourself out of debt. Do not spend your money on stupid things. Do not put a ton of money on a credit card. Do not take out personal loans. Get yourself out of debt. Before taking out a personal loan, get a second job and work your ass off because that's the better way to go long-term for yourself. And yeah, just start investing. You can you can pay cash for your home by the age of 30 if you're 20 right now, and probably be well on your way to have $1 million in retirement by the time you are 37. Does Donnell Pumphrey now being listed as a top running back on the depth chart change your opinion on him or Presley? No, he started last week too, and he played 10 less snaps than Presley, so no interest on that. So I love your show. Your great presentation and a good speaking voice. Thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate that. I didn't even go to broadcasting school. I thought about it like a couple months ago, and then I was like, what are they going to teach me there? How to like run some of the equipment, which I can probably ask friends about that work in like LA right now and in Hollywood sets. But thank you. I appreciate that. I'm appreciative that my voice is good enough. I don't know what it is. I never got any training on it. I guess I'm just an Italian from New York who likes to talk and got a decent enough accent to make it work out, huh? What's the most you have won in DFS? In a single day, $16,000. That was earlier this season in NBA. The biggest contests that I have won have all been two $10,000 first contests. That was earlier this year, then at the Masters last year. But yeah, I also don't shoot for the big contest, I guess you can say. Like, I'm never going to win the Millie Maker because I don't max enter the Millie Maker. I think I can make a lot better money in way other areas. I don't max enter NBA slates. I've max entered one NBA slate this year into the big contest. I'll max enter like the cheaper contests, but look, the flashy stuff is winning 50K to 100K to first, of course. I'm going to be in contests today that have those prize pools. The big one for XFL. I'm in the 222 that has 10K to first. That I think is a much better contest. But I have just like my goals for DFS are probably not like most people. When I see $100,000 to first, I go, okay, how many people are in the field? 30,000? Oh, I'm not playing the lottery today. I'd like to go make money. So I'm not as interested in cash games anymore because I think they're in NBA and really in all sports at this point. It's like solved. Like you don't have much of an edge. Single entry and 3-max, I think those are really good formats. Smaller fields too. So like every single day, more times than not in the NBA, my biggest upside in winning a contest is like $10,000, maybe sometimes $20,000 if I'm in one of those. I rarely will be playing the big contest. I will put my single entry lineup into the big contest, like NBA. If I play the $100 single entry, the 333, the 555, where there's only a couple people in those contests, I will put that lineup also into the big one in case it pops off. But I'll have one lineup in there. I have really no interest in trying to 150 max those because at the end of the day, there's people who have been doing it longer. I'm producing a ton of content, so I don't really care too much about 150 maxing the big contests and having $1,500 in one contest against pros. So yeah, I play single entry 3-max. But yeah, 16,000 was the most this year so far. Darius Victor interest? Yeah, he's interesting to me. I like the price point. Him seeing 3 receptions on 3 targets on like 10 routes run last week is probably not going to continue, but I think he's got to be at least in play. In Spag's article, he says McBride is out. Yeah, no, McBride is still questionable. I can pull it up right now for you. Trey Mcbride is, go to LA. Trey Mcbride is questionable right here. Questionable. This is for the 16th. That is tomorrow. So he's questionable. Do they have a tight end in the XFL? Yeah, they're listed as wide receivers. So some of the tight ends in the XFL are Nick Truesdale, was a number 1 pick for Tampa Bay. Donald Parham, who's only 3,200, I actually think is in play this week. You can see me list him right here. Marcus Lucas was a tight end for St. Louis last week, 4,600, but these guys pretty much ran as wide receivers. Sean Price was a Dallas tight end, not really any interest in him. Kerry Lee had the touchdown. So there's tight ends on each team. Houston's the only team without a tight end. Do you like playing more players on Sunday and waiting? I'm not doing it because it's on Sunday. That's a fine strategy. I'm just getting more players because the teams on Sunday are better, in my opinion, and the games are more appealing. Sal, you're more of a cash game player. I used to be, but in my opinion, cash games are not what they used to be. You can still have an edge in some sports. Like XFL, yes, cash is probably the best format you could be playing unless you're 150 maxing the big contests. XFL, there's a lot of edges right now in cash early on still. But NBA, by all accounts, in my opinion, cash games are like solved. Like they are. In NBA, you're winning based on if you can fade ownership in GPPs and fade the right ownership and have that algorithm maxed out to the best. But yeah, like NFL moving forward, I'm probably not going to be much of a cash player. MLB, there's no reason, in my opinion, to be playing cash unless you're just trying to have more exposure for some sort of bankroll reasons. But I don't think there's much of a reason in playing it that much in MLB. XFL and WNBA, I think cash games are fine though. Used to be a big cash player 3-4 years ago, but the amount of content out there right now and the amount of tools that you could use, Cash games, everybody knows the best NBA players of the night, locks them into their lineups, and you're pretty much playing people 2v2, and that sounds like a terrible idea. What is your most common entry fee? I play everything. I'll play $1 single entries. I'll play $222 single entries. I'll play the $100 single entry. I don't play anything in the $1,000 range yet, just because I don't think those are good contests long term for anybody. Anything that starts to go like above $20 or $50 is much harder to profit in long term in like large field GPPs. But I stick to single entry 3 max. I don't know my average entry fee. I haven't done those calculations. I don't really care too much. Like, I'll build one lineup that I really like a lot, 3 to 5 lineups for 3 max. I'll play some 20 max. And that lineup will go into everything from the quarter contests and single entries, as long as I can play those, as long as I stay below the $1 million entry fee limit. And then they'll go up to however confident I feel in that lineup. I'll play the 555 single entry some nights. I'll play the 777 single entries in NBA some nights, if they are single entry that night. But yeah, I'll play $100 usually every single time. So yeah, I don't know where that averages out for you. This is a good question. Random question, Sal, but it's fitting since it's tax season. It sure is. I've been talking with my accountant, exchanging all my paperwork yesterday for my LLC. But do you have to pay taxes on gambling/DFS winnings? Yes, you do. If you win more than $600, just like any other, I believe they send you, they send it to you. You can obviously request it. They were not sending it yet. I haven't seen anything. I haven't gotten anything yet. But yeah, you have to pay taxes. It's you're making money. You have to pay and this is a company that's going to send you paperwork, so it's easily going to be tracked by the IRS. So you better pay taxes on any of your gambling wins. I think you can make gambling losses a write-off. Last week we had this question brought up, and I think the write-off is if you're like a business expense. I don't know. I don't know exactly. Not the person to ask for the write-off part, but yeah. Do you go more GPPs or cash, and which are you more profitable at? Cash games have become less profitable over the years because of more information and more tools. GPPs are hard to profit in because you need one bank, and then you'll go cold for 1 to 2 months. My biggest profit, like money-wise, is GPPs, because the upside of winning $16,000 like I did earlier this year, you're not going to have that in cash. The ROI from winning cash is just going to be more stable. It's just going to be lower amounts, in my opinion. Yeah, you'll get a 1099. Yeah. Miscellaneous, right? A 1099 miss, yeah. Why is there a Sunday only XFL but not a Saturday only? I think the idea to have a Sunday only XFL, not a Saturday, is because if you have a Saturday only XFL, it's going to take more money people are going to put into that and not fill your large tournament. They want the large tournament to fill. So they're not going to put any more contests that stop that from happening. Have you played MLB cash games? Yes, I have before. I don't think they're that great, honestly. I mean, you're banking on home runs, and obviously pitching performances, you weight pitchers more in the MLB cash games. But at the end of the day, you're banking on home runs, and I'd rather just do that in stacks and in tournaments. Sal, any interest in NASCAR? No, I've never even watched a single lap, I guess, of NASCAR. I don't have anything bad to say about the sport, just not my thing. DK said that they will send their tax info by the end of February. Yeah, I saw somebody else, though, said that they still haven't, they're not going to get theirs till March. So some people are having trouble with that. All right, gang, I'm going to bounce. It's been about an hour. But hit the subscribe button before you leave. Hit the notification bell if you haven't done it yet for any reason. Helps me out for sure. Totally free to do so. I'll post on Patreon any injury updates, how that affects the tiers, answer questions in Discord up until lock. We got less than 3 hours now. Pretty exciting stuff. I chopped first in an NFL showdown this year. Expected tax documents. DK said they didn't have any tax documents for me. Dave Carroll, if you say, I don't know how much you won by chopping first. If it was like 4,000, I mean, if it was like 50,000, yeah, you should be taxed. But if it was like 4,000, but you've lost like 5,000 before that, not saying you have, but that's why. It's how much you profited from the site. All right, gang, I'm going to bounce. If you have any questions, reach out to me on Twitter. Follow me at DFS. Reach out to me over on Discord. That's where I'll be prioritizing the questions. Hit the subscribe button, all that stuff. Sign up to Patreon. Why not? Support me over there if you would like to see the tiers and rankings for today. We just had Braden signed up. I'm assuming that he saw this over on Sports or YouTube, so appreciate that. I'll get to your question over on Patreon now, Josh. So thank you. Thank you. Week 2 of the XFL. Best of luck, everybody, today. Hopefully the ratings don't drop off that much. I want these 100K prize pools to first, as always. You all rock. Peace out. See you later, alligators. Yo.